Hi, my name's Dee and welcome to Sunchild Tarot and welcome to a completely different show to normal. You'll notice that I have, on this side with me, my forever special guest, David Fischer. How are you doing, David?
Hi, Dee, I'm fine. How about you?
I'm well, thanks. Now, you will notice by the title of the video what we're talking about. This was something I was going to save for later, but then of course the Snyder cut of the Justice League has been released, so I've had to do it now because why not? And also everybody wants to know all about Darkseid, and so I have recruited David with a metaphorical gun to his head to come and help me with this chart, and there's a story behind this, so I'll tell you more in a moment. The first question you've got to ask is, why do the chart of a fictional character? From my point of view, fiction is important. Fiction is powerful. Fiction helped give me my love of science and my love of esoterica and my love of politics and my love of 101 different subjects. I very much see the superhero stuff, as you can tell by that, as a modern day mythology. The same archetypes that have been expressed through legends, through the ages, we are now getting in, well, it's no longer 4-color printing, is it? It's now in highly computerized colored comics every month. Fiction is powerful because we only have to look at this is my own personal opinion, the insurrection of the Capitol in Washington on January the 6th, which I know there's astrology behind this as well. So we can talk about that in a moment as well. But it's fiction is a highly motivating force. Now, you can also look at fictional characters as something that people will put a lot of beliefs and judgments towards. Anything that you can put beliefs and judgments towards will form what's called an egregore, an entity of astral reality, a thought form. And this was made all the more apparent to me. I was watching E.A. Koetting on Become a Living God one time, and he was saying how you can magically work with Archangel Michael, or you can magically work with the egregore of Archangel Michael, who is not Archangel Michael, but the sum total of what everyone believes Archangel Michael to be, making that a valid force, if weaker, in and of its own self. However, that does mean that Darkseid is an egregore, which makes him in effect real, which is highly terrifying, but we'll just gloss over that fact for the moment. Another way of looking at this with egregores is you may notice if you watch my tarot readings, I have a lot of Gnostic sympathies and I have a lot of pagan sympathies. My full moon gods at play readings are about the dichotomy between the two philosophies, where according to Gnosticism, all the gods are masks worn by the archons as they try to influence us to vibrate in fear and misery and, you know, full anti-life equation stuff. Whereas you was to say that out loud at a pagan conference, you may well get lynched, because you can see the gods as vibrant, powerful, expressive, natural energies at the same time, where that's the furthest thing from an archon as you can get. So these egregores, as well as just the planting seeds in young minds, are quite vibrant forces in and of themselves. Now, David, you had something you was going to say about the whole why the chart of a fictional character as well, didn't you?
Definitely. I was going to chime in and just say that when you get the chart of a fictional character, you're not really looking as you would look to a person, obviously, because a person is going to be developing in different ways, let's put it like that. But you have charts for events, you have charts for cities, you have chart for a variety of things, because the premise is that the chart for any given moment will express the qualities which whatever rises in that moment or comes into consciousness, into being in that moment, is an expression of the higher consciousness, let's say, or an image that is being thought by the cosmos, to put it in more esoteric terms, because we can't really go into the philosophical, to the depths of the philosophical reasoning behind it all. But so even if it is a fictional character, it has a representation of how it will impact the consciousnesses that are going to come into contact with that particular egregore. It's still going to, the chart of the moment where we became aware of that egregore for the first time is going to be significant to see the way we deal with that egregore is going to develop. Anyway, yeah, that's basically it. So
an expression of universal energies from that moment in time.
Yes, and we can use that moment in time to describe any particular thing that had its beginning in that particular moment or in that particular day.
Now, I must admit, that idea was legitimized for me when I attended I think it was Fresh Voices in Astrology, and somebody, and I think it was an astrologer called Kira, but I might be wrong, did a presentation about the chart of the Voting Rights Act in the United States. And I was like, well, if an act of, I was going to say act of parliament, that's showing my Britishness. If an act of Congress can have its own chart, then yes, a fictional character will have its own chart. Now, I had some discussion with friends, David being one of them, about when the birth time of a fictional character is. And we were thinking about the moment of inspiration. Is that it? Or the writer's room? Say you're talking about the birth of a TV character. Is it when they're in the writing room? Is it in pre-production with the scripts or post-production with the editing? Or is it the point of exposure to the public consciousness? Now, one astrologer, and I think it's Dane Rudyard, but I may well be wrong, says that the moment of birth can be defined by going from a closed environment into an open environment. So I chose the time that the comics would be hitting the newsstand. Darkseid first appeared, let me grab my notes, in cameo as a shadow in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, issue 134. Now, this was cover dated December 1970, but actually hit the newsstands, according to Mike's Amazing Comics, hit the newsstands on the 13th of October, 1970. Now, so I've taken that date of the 13th because even though he didn't really appear until 2 months later in Forever People #1, you saw his silhouette, but more importantly, you saw that he was this shadow was the mastermind behind everything, and this shadow was a person, whoever it was. So I've chosen a birth time of 6 o'clock in the morning. That is assuming that people are starting to go to work and they are picking their daily paper up from the newsstands, who will have received this comic, and they're probably picking up the comic for their kids. There is, if it was in later years when it was like direct market only, then probably I would choose 9 o'clock in the morning when the comic shop's open. But this was all newsstand trade at that time. And the benefit with choosing a dawn time for this as well is that the sun is always near to the ascendant of the chart. So what that means for non-astrologers is that the identity of the character, the sun, is very close to how he is perceived, the ascendant. I've got that bit right, haven't I? So,
well, I mean, it would make sense thinking about it, just because these characters, they are kind of solar principles in a way, as they stand for specific ideals. They stand for specific forms. They are images that we are meant to see and identify with, and want to engage in seeing their story. They are things that are basically meant to be seen and to spread a kind of message, perhaps, maybe not all of them, but sometimes they are. But they do become role models anyway, in a lot of ways. What?
Hopefully not in Darkseid's case.
Yeah, they do become role models in any case, because they were initially made for kids, although they do know that the adult public is very engaged with comics nowadays, and fantasy world and all of that being its own industry. But yeah, but so these characters, as we were saying earlier, they are a modern mythology. They're made for us to watch them, to be seen and to be inspired by. So it makes sense to have the sun close to the sun.
The other advantage of this time of day is that you also can have day charts and night charts, which I've yet to still understand the full difference of. But David, I believe this is important.
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
Day charts and night charts and the difference between them is important.
Well, it's just important because you have a certain affirmations that you can only make. You have certain delineations that you can only take from a chart once you've established a few parameters for evaluating that chart. And one of those parameters is sect, day or night chart. That will divide the planets into, these are more conscious planets, work more in your aware consciousness. This is more in your subjective consciousness or subconscious. These other planets are working on, and yeah, you have some differentiations to determine which planets are better than others. You have malefic planets and benefic planets that will be better in day charts and worse in night charts. So it will determine a lot in the chart, just by looking at that one principle. Right,
so to conclude, choosing the time of birth, 6 a.m, people picking up the comics from the newsstands, 13th of October, 1970. And obviously I have chosen New York because that's where DC's offices were. And if you've been reading comics for any times like me, it's very nearly my 40th year of reading comics. It's my 39th year of reading comics. Then you know that all the superheroes live in New York, and that's the end of story. So there's the other thing with this chart. So I played a trick on David, and I'm sure David will back me up here. I presented him with a chart, and I just said, right, tell me what about this chart. Now, this chart, well, David, tell me, you recount the story. I've talked long enough.
Yeah, I think you didn't tell me initially that this was a fictional character's chart, but because I kind of knew you, I started looking at the chart and the way you were responding to some of my affirmations of some placements in the chart and this character's history that actually matched, they fit. But I noticed quickly enough that by the way you were talking about it, that this person might not exist. And I was like, is this a fictional character? And when you confirmed it, I was like, yeah, I see the parents drama. I see the thing here in the ascendant. And is this Superman? Because it was quite clear by a lot of details in the chart.
Yes, and it was, so that proved to us a validity in these charts, didn't it? It certainly proved to me. I was expecting the chart to talk about the intellectual property that is Superman. No, that's not what it said at all, really, was it? You were saying
no, we're talking more about even about factors of how the story was presented to the public were present in the chart. You just you just have to make the connections with the houses that are being activated to really see the picture.
So this started my love affair with the idea, and also my constant asking, and I still, David's heard me say this many times, how does this work? How does this work? It works, but how? But that's a discussion for like hours on another show. So I don't think we need to go into this.
Yeah.
So I only finally got that date because I've lost my geek card. I didn't know Mike's Amazing World website existed. So once I found that out, and I looked on it to get the date for Darkseid's first appearance, which was coincidentally only a couple of weeks before the release of the Snyder Cut, I was overjoyed. And then I put those details into the machine and found out his placements and just went, oh my God. And if ever there was something that proves to me that Darkseid is, it's this chart. So for those of you who are au fait with astrology, you will get this. And those of you who are au fait with comics, you will get this. His moon is 29 degrees, 52 minutes of Pisces. This means his moon is 8 arc minutes away from the very end of the zodiac. The moon represents his feelings. He feels like he is the end. And so I was like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. You know, there's, but it gets better. Neptune is, where's Neptune here? 29 degrees, 10 minutes, Scorpio. So that 29 degrees is really important. It's the very end of a sign. Scorpio is about death and transformation. Neptune is dreams. He dreams of death and transformation. Yeah, I think we can all agree that Darkseid dreams of death and transformation. That is pretty much a given. And that was conjunct Venus in Scorpio by 5 degrees. Venus in Scorpio people apparently can tend to get their way and can be quite controlling. So I was absolutely blown away. And at that point, my analysis of the chart pretty much ended, although I've dived into it since, because now I have to turn over to the professional. And you can tell me more about Darkseid. One last thing before we dive into the planets. The Sabian symbols. Sabian symbols are symbols that were channeled through by an astrologer and a medium together in 1925, I think, anyway, in the 20s. And the Sabian symbol for 29 degrees Pisces is called by famed astrologer Dane Rudyard the Great Stone Face.
Yeah, that was actually mind-blowing.
The image is actually of a stone face carved into a cliff, and there's a young lad looking at that face, and because of the inspiration he gets from the face, he decides what he wants to be in life, and he goes on a determined path. You know, maybe a path seeking the anti-life equation, who knows? But the fact is that Dane Rudyard calls it the Great Stone Face. David, over to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's astounding how these symbols work, because when you look at how they were channeled, how they were created, the Sabian symbols and other kinds of channeled information symbols, you would think this is more of a personal perspective of the practitioner that was working with them. But the thing is, when you apply the imagery that they describe to real life and to what's being manifested literally, you can have stuff like the stone face, as you just mentioned, and then things like Darkseid manifesting with literally his face being like stone. So yeah, and he's got the moon there in that degree, and the moon is a planet that is quite important for a night chart for someone who was born at night. It's the luminary, or the planet, the light that we call for nocturnal charts. So it would be quite representative of his personality and of his impulses in general, what's the driving force of his spirit, in other words. is defined by that. So quite interesting.
And of course, Darkseid is a night chart because of course he is.
Because of course he is. I mean, okay, so talking about night charts a little bit here, you have the moon as an important planet. The night chart planets, they are the moon, they are Venus and Mars. They are the ones who are going to be the most conscious planets. You don't really have to know a whole bunch of it, just why I'm going to describe them right now. Is Venus and the moon, they are both very influential in this native's personality. It's a night chart. The moon would be influential anyway, but Venus is the ruler of the ascendant as well, which gives her a lot of power over describing what the face of the image, or what the representation in an imagetic sense of that character that was being born at that moment was going to be. So this Venus is in. You can say something?
Yeah, just explain for the non-astrologers in the audience what a rulership is and why Venus is ruling this ascendant.
Perfect. Yeah. Sorry, you have some signs connected to some planets in particular, and they have the signs derive their natures from these planets. So when you have a determined planet in a sign, you look at the planet, at the other planet associated to that sign, if not that same planet in it, to get the results from it. Or any other given house. If the house is empty in your chart, you just look at the ruler of the house or the planet that is associated with that sign to see what's going to happen to the house. If it has a good promise, general promise for your life, or if it's more challenging, meaning that you're going to face more problematic situations or circumstances rising from that area. In this case, we are talking about sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, just as you can see from the chart, because I'll put it up on screen now, the ascendant is in Libra, and Venus is the planetary ruler of the sign of Libra. So whatever Venus says, the ascendant will obey, adhere to, be expressed through, yeah?
Yes. So that planet basically represents the avatar or archetype that is going to most symbolize what we know as that character that was born in that moment. So Venus is what symbolizes it, which is kind of odd to think about, because Venus was supposed to be about beauty. Venus was supposed to be about cohesion. Venus was supposed to be about togetherness, bringing things together, making things one.
There's that aspect, but also Venus syncretized to Astarte, who was a goddess of love and war. So there's that aspect to it as well.
Yes. Venus and Mars, they are polar opposites, but it's kind of in yin and yang in a little bit, because they are kind of secret lovers in mythology, because they're always kind of yearning for each other. So you see those dystopic representations in movies of our society in the future, where everything seems to be perfectly in order, but everyone's afraid inside and no one can trust anyone, and you're constantly being threatened by what's outside coming to war with what's inside. That's a Venus taken to an extreme. And that's why also Libra is the exaltation of Saturn, because it can bring that structure that Saturn yearns for in a way. But we don't have time to dive too much into Libra itself. Talking about how that speaks to Darkseid mostly, we can say that because Venus is in Scorpio here, and Scorpio is a sign that Venus doesn't really like to be in. When we say that, it's because the sign has a nature that is contrary to that of the planet that inhabits it. So the planet is said to be in exile. And that condition for Venus means that she will have a perverse type of notion of beauty. a perverse type of notion of oneness, a perverse type of trying to bring things together. Now, I'm not saying that every native of Venus in Scorpio is going to have that same character. I'm just saying that archetypally, this is what it's supposed to represent. And this character really embodies the principles that we see in this chart here in this manner. It can manifest in several ways, but in conjunction with Neptune, you see that it's trying to bring oneness into things in a way that dissolves everything that already is, because it's trying to negate. Scorpio is a sign that belongs to Mars, is associated in the same manner that Venus is to Libra. Scorpio is associated to Mars. You have then this dissociative quality, whereas Venus is oneness, Mars is trying to separate things. Mars is trying to bring one thing forward in detriment of everything else that stays behind, in a way, because it's focusing in one thing is a very kind of drying energy and agitating energy. So for a planet like Venus, a nocturnal planet that wants to bring togetherness and fertility in a sign that brings divergence, well, basically, you got a lot of fertility for divergence. You got a lot of fertility for someone who is going to express as the antithesis of anything that you would consider naturally appealing, and they would make it their appeal. And Jupiter being there also gives it an oomph, also gives it a larger than life perspective on it. It's like, okay, so I don't agree with the natural standards of oneness here and how this order is established, and I want to change it. I want to make it new. I want to make it fit my own opinion about it, which is Jupiter being there with that Venus. So he's very well opinionated, is trying to assimilate everyone to his own despotic state, if we can call it that, or reality or dimension. Are you going to say something?
Well, I mean, astrologers like keywords, don't they? So if there is any keyword for Darkseid, antithesis is definitely one that would be on near the top of that list.
Yeah, definitely. I was very impressed because I'm not a geek, and Dee sent me actually a few resource materials for me to go into before we did this. And I was quite surprised, actually, to see how much thought can go into these quote-unquote mythologies, you know, and how Darkseid's character really comes through when we're looking at the principles of these particular, the essence of these particular planets and how they're modified by these placements in the chart.
To clarify David's statement there, he is not a geek. He is not comics literate. He mixes up the multiverses, thought the Avengers were from DC, and has said Batman was from Marvel. And so he does not know his comics. He does not in the slightest. He is coming at this from the mythology. I mean, obviously, I'm trying to seduce him into the way of comics because what other way is there? But he has come to this from a point of view of not knowing anything about these characters whatsoever, which just made, I could, as much as I couldn't believe the chart when I first looked at it, when I presented this, because I did exactly the same, I was like, oi, David, look at this chart. That was it. That's all I said. And he started describing what he could see. I mean, again, you did know it was a fictional character at this point, so the planets themselves rather spelled out what sort of fictional character, but I was just blown.
Yes.
I mean, I will refer you to my earlier point of how does this work? But anyway, carry on, David. I'm sorry, I took over there.
That's all right. I want to actually talk a little bit about how the character developed, because we are talking about here a specific arc of the story where this character, when introduced, was belonged to a specific planet. It was kind of a Thanos-like image, if I can even mention that name here in a DC related.
No. Darkseid.
But that was not.
DC Thanos. Thanos is Marvel's Darkseid, and that's a really important. I know Thanos hit the movie community before Darkseid, but
definitely. And I'm sorry I phrased it that way. But what I meant with this is that you have a particular character that comes from a place in this dimension and reality, whereas with Darkseid, which came first, you have a character that manifests, as we later came to find out, through other arcs in this world of the DC comics. There was a character that was living in kind of parallel dimensions. It's living outside of our own reality in a way, and it's manifesting its own consciousness through avatars or images that appear to be like him, or that manifest a specific portion of his consciousness, infinite to us consciousness. Because we live in a reality that is contained by its Darkseid's reality, so we are less than it, so it is infinite by our standards.
Darkseid
is, and the Omega, the end, the moon being in the last, literally the last minutes of the zodiac to begin a new cycle at the furthest end. And trine, which means giving a support, it's in a configuration of support to those two planets, Venus and Neptune, there very closely, which it speaks to the fact that all these avatars seek the same thing. But since you don't have Venus, looking at the ascendant, which means Venus does not make what we astrologers, and I'm sorry for the people who don't know much of astrology here, you would have to research this bit on your own because it's too much to cover. But you would have an aspect, you having an aspect from the ruler of the ascendant, in this case Venus, to the ascendant is good. You're not having it, such as here, you don't have a classical aspect, as we call it, a sextile, a trine, a square, or an opposition, or a conjunction to the ascendant from Venus, is actually not allowing those avatars or those images, such as the one we are first presented to when this chart is cast, to sustain themselves. They do not sustain for long. They are destroyed, they are overcome in a way, or they are somehow eclipsed or left to come back later. But they never, in the end, they never end up actualizing their plans, even though sometimes they might feel like they're going to stick. They don't. They always collapse in a way.
On that note, in this chart, we need to mention the rulerships thing, but in this chart, using the classical astrology, also the sun, nothing is talking to the sun. Modern astrology would point out that it's quincunx Saturn, so it doesn't understand the rules. And it's semi-square Lilith, which I don't know how to interpret. I can have a guess, but I'll probably be wrong. But that's it. That's the only actual by degree aspects that the sun is making. The sun is not just not the luminary of the chart with it being a night chart, but the sun is pushed to one side and ignored. It can go and stand in the corner and think about what it's done, because it's nothing and no one is talking to it. It is all about this, I am the end, I will control, I will,
it's all about becoming almost.
Yes.
It's not about being, it's about the process of becoming almost, but never actualizing it, because you have the sun in fall in Libra, which is a condition similar to exile, where the planet doesn't have much resource to manifest its own agenda or its own essence in a way that would be positive subjectively to the natives, let's say. The moon being in the 6th house is also to do with that, with the fact that you can't have an image of those impulses, of those yearnings that Darkseid has. You can't have that image being fully actualized. at least not yet. I'm not sure if DC is planning at one point to make Darkseid, you know, dominate everything and just be as it is. But
Well, I did show you
at the moment.
What I showed David was 2 videos, and
Sorry.
I highly recommend them. I'll put the links in the description below. From The Imaginary Axis, another YouTube channel, where he delves into just what is the nature of Darkseid. And I highly recommend these. I'll put them down there. But there is that point when he won but nearly died and then took the universe with him. But again, that was self-defeating, but because he won, everything got destroyed. So that again, there is that whole, what you were saying.
I'm sorry, I lost it a bit. I lost that last bit.
Because he won, everything got destroyed. So therefore he hadn't won because he wasn't in control of everything because it was all destroyed. So again, there's that point of not quite coming to fruition. And we was talking about the almosts in the chart. I know we said we weren't going to talk to this, but it's almost, but not quite a full moon. The day later was the full moon. Just explain.
Which would be something perhaps valuable to the sun. I don't know, to have a planet opposite to it by sign. It could be good for it. I don't know. Even though conflictuous, you would have something to reflect.
Just to explain very, very briefly why moon in the 6th house. What is the 6th house? I mean, you go around like the clock, but backwards with the number of the houses. But what does the 6th house represent?
Yeah. So the 6th house is a place where the planets that just set in the horizon in the west are going towards. They are falling away from that pivot in the horizon plane. So the pivot would be the horizon plane itself. They are concealed, and once they are concealed, they are in that 6th house, according to quadrant house divisions. So in this sense, the planet is not being seen by the ascendant. It cannot really tell the ascendant consciously, send a conscious message to the ascendant, even though it is a part of the general life of that thing that is represented by the ascendant. And it represents things that we don't generally want to pay attention or cannot pay attention to in our daily, in a daily basis, because our routines don't allow us, because things are not too, because we are not having a lot of support to achieve things that we want, and we feel like everything we try to do is constantly being negated by everything else, and we have to make a larger than life effort to achieve anything that is in that 6th house. It's a house of effort. It's a house of illness, accidents. And what is an illness? If not things that go wrong with your body, which is your primary machine to do anything, you know, your primary moving, you know, device to talk and think and do whatever you want. When you're ill, you can barely think straight because your body is not functioning straight. So you're impeded to do things. Everything takes more effort to be done. So the 6th house pertains to those kinds of delays and ailments that before the human or whatever it is, it's problems. So you have the moon in the 6th. It is a character. It is a character that is speaking to bringing bad things into everything else, basically. But more than that, is someone who represents the concept of marginalization itself. It's someone who represents the concept of the things we ignore in themselves, you see.
Oh,
and this is where its moon is.
That's really good. That's yeah. This wow.
Because the 6th house represents marginalized individuals as well. This is a theme I research as well a lot, that you're probably not going to find that in many source texts, but this is something that I've seen over and over again. That's the 6th house. It is the experience of being marginalized. So how about having Darkseid, which is the concept of marginalization itself, having the luminary of the sect, which is this very important representative for your spirit, in that 6th house. It's basically trying to make everything else be this in this marginalized state of despair and lack, basically. It's trying to make everything else be assimilated into that reality of lack and of not achieving things, the almost things that are amiss in the end.
Now, we've been talking about this for quite some time, so we need to wrap this one up. But we are going to return to this subject. I am hoping that this is probably just the first of quite a few analyses of Darkseid's chart. So that's why on my little thumbnail, you will see it says part 1, because I have no idea how many parts, because working on it, certainly especially for an amateur like me, it's created so many rabbit holes where I've just found out so much. It's so much fun. I love this stuff. I like comics. I like when lots of things interconnect with lots of other things. I've got, that's the way.
And definitely, and that's the feature in astrology that you'll find in abundance, obviously.
Yes, yeah, it's like the gift that keeps on giving, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Especially since comic production seems to be slowing nowadays. But there's one last point on an astrology level. Before we wrap up today, I just want to point out, and I know you will point out the difference where I'm wrong, because you already have done. But there's rulerships. It doesn't matter, apart from one instance that David will tell us about in a moment, it doesn't matter whether you use traditional rulerships or modern rulerships, the same things are happening. So Scorpio, whether it is ruled by Mars traditionally or Pluto in the modern way, they are both in Virgo. They have that statement. What was the other one? Not Venus.
You have Neptune, the modern ruler of Pisces, being in the same sign as Jupiter, the ancient ruler.
So, as you said, Uranus is the one difference. Uranus.
Uranus would be the one that just, yeah.
But Uranus would be. That's Uranus's nature, isn't it? But with those other rulerships, it's like, yeah, stick your rulerships. Darkseid is beyond that. Darkseid is the statement that will mold the rulerships to his will, not the other way around, which I thought was a beautiful expression to see out of the chart. Yeah. The floor is yours again, David. Do you have anything?
Oh, yeah, I don't use modern rulerships, definitely don't, but I do see the relation that these planets have, and I would vouch for conversations around how to better address the similarities and affiliations they seem to have with certain energies, such as Neptune perhaps with Pisces. Could we make a case for Cancer even with all the water signs? Maybe, I don't know. We'd have to research that. But modern rulers, I wouldn't call it that because of the way I perceive rulership to play a part in astrology. But yes, it is nevertheless interesting to look at the fact that those planets that in a modern way of looking at them are together, basically trying to point you to the same things. Archetypally, kind of mixing the modern and ancient significations of those signs in the same direction. Yeah,
because Darkseid don't care. That's the way I took that. Right, so we are going to do another one of these, so we'll dive into the chart more. Please do come and join us. I hope it's been an interesting discussion on the nature of Darkseid. If you want more Darkseid before we make our second video, go check out those imaginary axis videos. It's a good hour and a half of you. Hour and a half, would you say, the two of them put together? But,
yeah, a little less than that. It was quite quick to watch. It wasn't that, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, it's quick to watch. You don't feel like it's an hour and a half, but it is actually an hour and a half.
And it's also interesting. I want to mention the fact as a disclaimer that next time we're going to dive into a few more archetypes. We've maintained it, we kept it to Venus basically and the basics of it, because we are also talking about why we are doing this and all. But next time we can go into the fact that he uses avatars and Mercury's in the ascendant, how Mars conjunct Pluto plays into that Venus expression as well. Yeah, and more stuff on the North Node and the 6th, perhaps with the Moon as well. So there are some interesting topics for us to.
You've reminded me, now that you've mentioned it, we can't finish without just Pluto in the 12th house. Pluto being Pluto, another, the end, the death, the chaos of bringing things to the surface. The 12th house, the place of endings. You know, we have the end in the end.
Literally, yeah. It's the place of demons, and it's literally, he could be considered a modern analogy to a devil archetype. So it's the place of literally the bad spirit, which is later translated when you get the words associated to the house in the ancient texts. You can get to the word demon, literally. So yeah, it would be the house of the devil anyway. In the chat.
That we will save for next episode. So thank you for joining us. Obviously, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And when we've done Darkseid, maybe we should look at his younger brother Thanos at some point. You know, I'm teasing there because I love Thanos, but he's not Darkseid. Because remember, Darkseid is. Cheers.